What's up guys? Welcome to the Decent Garage. Today is going to be a fun video, something I've been waiting months for now. But today we're going to be installing a new torque converter on the OG crew cab. So like I said, I've been waiting to do this for a couple months now because Suncoast was pretty backed up on the torque converters. So I got a Suncoast stock stall torque converter, got a new flex plate with the friction shims right here. And then I also got all new transmission cooler lines. Now, this is from Suncoast. I'll put Brad Posadas from Facebook. He's the one who kind of turned me on to them, and he kind of got the deal made and talked me into doing a Suncoast converter. He also provided the flex plate with the converter. And then Logan Ellis on Facebook, he's the one who does these braided cooler lines, and they are very high quality. They come with all the fittings. He even sent me a bunch of adapters in case some of these fittings didn't work, but he's great to deal with. His prices, I was shocked when he told me how much it cost. It's not expensive at all for what it is, and to get rid of those old crusty hard lines and get some of these flexible braided lines in there, it's totally worth it. So this is going to be a step-by-step instructional video how to take the transmission out, replace the torque converter, and put it all back together. When I was researching for this video, I could not find a good, concise video on how to do this, but let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first step is going to be drain the transmission. You'll notice I have a Mag High-Tech double deep pan, which comes with a drain plug in it, which is very convenient. So I'm going to drain mine. If you have a stock pan, you're going to have to take all the pan bolts out and gently pry it away and just let it drip out a little bit. Once it stops dripping, you can pull the whole pan down and let it all drain out. This is also a great opportunity. If you have a stock pan, you should have a new transmission filter ready to go to put in. Luckily, mine is not old at all, so I'm just gonna use my drain plug and go from there. All right, now that we have the pan drained, now if you have the stock transmission, you'll have to drain it and then put the pan back on. Now we need to drain our cooler lines. So we've got one here, and we've got one that comes right in here into the transmission. So we're just gonna undo these fittings, drain them into the pan. And then for me, I also have this auxiliary Durelli cooler. This is between the driver's side frame rail and rocker panel. So I've had this in here for a couple of years. I really like it, it does a great job. I'm gonna have to drain this too. So we'll disconnect the hoses here and drain this as well. All right, at this point, I've got my soft lines that came to my auxiliary cooler that's right under here. Got the transmission drain. Now what I'm gonna do is pull all the hard lines out because I'm replacing them. And in order to drop the transmission, we're gonna need them out of the way anyway. So basically you've got a line that goes over to the passenger side of the engine block under the turbo. There's a liquid to liquid cooler over there. Then it comes back out, routes back here, then goes up front to the air to liquid cooler. And then it comes back and goes back in the transmission. So we're just gonna pull all those out real quick so they're out of the way. All right, so here we are looking up on the passenger side of the block. So right up there, that is your fluid to fluid heat exchanger. And you'll see those flare nuts that are holding it on, those are 7/8 inch. And then if you're gonna take the lines out, you have to take all these holders off of them. These are just 1/2 inch, so you just take all those off. So we'll get those off up there, and then we should be able to take all the hard lines out. Now that we have the hard lines out, we're going to take the front drive shaft out. So we've got these 4 5/8 inch bolts right here that hold it on. And then we've got the 4 bolts that hold the collar onto the U-joint. And I believe those are 1/2 inch or maybe slightly smaller than that. All right, next thing, We have the front drive shaft out. Now we need to get the rear out. The rear is easier and harder. So it's easier in that both the front and the back U-joints are just held on by these collars, and those are easy to take out. So we'll get those out. But it's harder in the fact that we have to undo the carrier bearing right here, which is an 11/16 nut right here. So we'll undo those, and then we have to slip the whole drive shaft out back toward the rear of the truck. So it's not super hard, but by myself, it's a little more difficult, but I can do this. We've got the drive shafts out. Now we're going to take this out. This is your vehicle speed sensor. You want to take this out because if you hit this on anything, it'll snap, and these are kind of hard to replace. So it's just best to take it out. It's a 1-inch fitting. Just like that. Then we can undo the connector right here. And there we go. Now we have to take the linkage off for the shifter. So there's two out here on the outside of the frame rail. There's two 9/16 bolts that we have to undo. So now we have to pop this off right here. There we go. All right, so I decided not to undo this one right here, just because I can twist it out of the way, and it'll clear when the transmission drops. So we'll leave it there unless we run into something else that makes it so we need to move it. Now, one more thing here is the TV cable, the throttle valve cable right here. Just push up on that. So it slides out a little bit, but it gets blocked by the bell housing. But if you slide it out, it gives you access to the bolt that holds the bracket on. There we go. And we'll just leave that bracket kind of hanging there. So we've got everything cleared out of the way. The last thing we need to do is unplug all the wiring harness from it. There's just a couple plugs, which is easy to do. And then we'll be ready to start taking torque converter bolts off. So let's get those unplugged. So right here on the front side of the adapter plate on the passenger side, you can see there's an inspection cover here where we can put a barring tool in. And then there's two 1/2-inch bolts to pull the cover off where we can access the torque converter bolts. Now this is very difficult to access with the exhaust here. So I think what I'm gonna do is pull the whole exhaust off, and that way I just have better access to it. It'll be easier overall. A lot of extra work, but I think it'll make it easier. So I'm gonna do that real quick. All right, I got the down pipe taken out along with all the exhaust. That was fairly simple, but you can see I've got the plug taken out for the barring tool, and I've got the cover plate taken out for the access to the torque converter bolts. So we've got that cleared, and yeah, it was much easier if you take the down pipe out at least. So there you can see we've got all the exhaust pieces down there. All right, so here we have our engine barring tool. So you can turn the engine over on the alternator as well, but this just makes it easier because what I'm gonna do, I'll stick this in here. I've got the ratchet set to loosen, so counterclockwise. And as I turn it, I can fill in this inspection hole And right there I can feel a torque converter bolt coming up. And you can probably see that. There's a torque converter bolt. So what we'll do is we'll take our barring tool out. All right, so now we will get our socket on the torque converter bolts. And mine are 16 millimeter. The new ones with my new torque converter are a different size, but you may have to figure out what size yours are. And what we're going to do is take them out one by one. Pretty easy process, just get one out and then keep turning the motor. All right, so the torque converter bolts are all out. There were 6 of them. That was a fairly easy process. I was not looking forward to that, but that was really easy. So now we have the bell housing bolts, but we're gonna leave those on for now. But what I'm gonna do is leave the middle bolt on each side on there, so it's still holding the transmission. I'll also have to take out the skid plate for the transfer case, but that's super easy as well. So once we get that, we'll have 2 bolts holding the cross member on. We'll come up and take the bell housing bolts on. So let's get to that point. We've got those cross member bolts off except for 1 or 2 of them. Now what we need to do is we're going to take the transfer case linkage off. So there's 3 bolts right here holding it to the tail shaft, and then it connects to this rod that comes down and is held on. There's a little tiny cotter pin in here. So we'll take that cotter pin out, pop the rod up, and take those 3 bolts out. All right, so I actually ended up just pulling the linkage out. All I had to do is take the knob off of the shifter, which was easy, just loosen the little lock nut, and then it just came out. So that's nice and easy. That came out way easier than I thought it would. I still got some bolts holding the cross member on, and I still have the bell housing bolts in. So we're to the point where we're about to try and pull the transmission. I'm gonna be systematic about this. What I have is I have the transfer case supported by a regular floor jack right now. I still have some bolts on this cross member holding it up, and I still have the bell housing bolts in. So I'm going to keep this supported here by the jack, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to unbolt the whole cross member, so all the bolts supporting this. So I'll unbolt that, so that's off, and then what's supporting it is the bell housing bolts and this jack. So at that point, I'll come in, I'll get the transmission jack underneath the transmission pan. I'll get a bottle jack with a piece of wood. I'm going to support the engine on the actual adapter plate. Then when we take the transmission off, the engine will be supported from rocking backwards. We don't want it to rock back and twist the motor mounts and mess anything up in the engine compartment. So let's do that. Let's get this unbolted, and then we'll get the transmission jack under here and get the bell housing bolts out. Ah, I'm excited. All right, I'm just gonna ratchet strap this thing to the tranny jack just for safety's sake. We're ready to do it. Everything's ready to go. I think I did pull the transmission cross member, super easy. I used a 24mm socket on the 2 bolts that go up into the bottom of the brace on the transmission. It's very easy, it was totally worth it. Wish me luck, guys. I've never done this. Don't know what I'm doing, but we're gonna get it out. So, nervous and excited. Here we go. We did it. Oh boy. That was actually really smooth, really easy getting that out. I thought it was gonna be a fight pulling it off of the flex plate, but it just came right out. So there we go. Now, here's one issue with the double deep pan. That's as low as I can get it. So I backed it all the way up into these partial cross members, and I'm just gonna leave it right there because I can't get it out, which is fine. We'll leave it there. We have access to the flex plate right there, so that's perfect. We're not gonna do a rear main seal right now. We should, and you should if you're doing this, but I'm not going to because I know something you guys don't know about the future of this truck. So we're not gonna do it right now. But we can change the flex plate. We can pull the torque converter. It's gonna be heavy because it's full of fluid, but you know, I can handle that. I think I can do it. So now we've got the transmission out. We're gonna do the torque converter in just a second because that's gonna be pretty messy. So what we're gonna do first is change out the flex plate. So I'm gonna mark my flex plate to know exactly where it's at so I can clock the other one the same way. I don't know if that's necessary, but that's what I'm gonna do. Now these bolts are put on there very tight. I'll go over the torque spec in a second, but you'll need to put your barring tool back in. And my barring tool has a little slop in it. So basically I'm gonna use a clamp and clamp it to the flex plate so that it won't turn. So let's get these bolts taken out and put the new flex plate back in. All right, real quick, I'm gonna interject right here. I actually messed this part up. I pulled it all apart and did it correctly, but the correct thing to do is to put the friction shim against the crank, then put the flex plate on and bolt that straight on. So it should go crank, friction shim, flex plate, bolted on. So you don't use that huge washer that came off of the stock flex plate. So I pulled this all apart and I did it correctly now. So I actually had to call Suncoast because I just wasn't sure about that stock disc that went on the outside. And that's what they told me to do, is do the friction shim, flex plate, and then just bolt it straight on, 100 foot-pounds with Loctite. So that's good to go. We can move on to the torque converter. All right, here goes nothing. Fluid. Oh, that wasn't too bad. It wasn't as heavy as I was expecting it to be. Perfect. So we'll clean this up, we'll pull this out and go fill the new torque converter with a couple quarts of ATF and just throw it back up in here. Whew. Surprisingly easy. All right, so here's the old torque converter. That came out easier than I was expecting it to. And it's actually, I thought this thing was gonna be pretty, I don't know, beat up. I don't know what I was expecting, but it looks pretty clean. I don't know. Anyways, we're gonna take the cap off of this one. There we go. Now, we're not gonna get into a debate about tranny fluid in this video. I usually use ATF plus 4, but they actually recommended Dex 3 or Dex Merc. A, it's cheaper than ATF plus 4, and B, on a non-lockup converter and a used transmission, you don't need all those additives is what they said. So they said definitely just use Dex 3, so that's what I'm doing. All right, I put 3 quarts of ATF in there. Time to lift it back in. So here we go. There we go. Man, that was way easier than I thought it would be. Hallelujah. All right. Time to reassemble. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna lift the trans back up in. We'll get some bell housing bolts on, keep the TK supported, and then we'll get the cross member on, and then we'll just start reassembling. Anytime I run into torque specs, I'll pause and tell you guys what the torque specs are, but until we get to the new transmission lines, it's basically just reassemble it how we took it apart. So let's get it done. All right, I've got the bell housing bolts torqued down to 50 foot-pounds. Those are good to go. I did all the torque converter bolts. Let's see if you can see. There you can see one of them. So I did all those, torqued to 35 foot-pounds with blue Loctite. That wasn't hard, it was just kind of a pain, you know. You had to use the barring tool and keep turning it over and find the hole and put it in and screw them down and torque it. So it wasn't hard, just monotonous, and that's done. So all that's buttoned up. Now we just need to start putting things back together. Transfer case linkage, drive shafts, exhaust, and then cooler lines. And we should be good to go. So, all right guys, I've got drive shafts in both front and rear. I've got the cross member all put on. Got the transfer case linkage put in up there. So what I have left to do, I need to plug the wiring harness in and hook up the linkage for the shifter, the column shifter. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll hook the new lines up. So it all went together really easily. It took a lot longer to tear it apart than it did to put it back together, that's for sure. So let's get to that point, and then we'll talk about the new coolant lines. The last thing we need to do is to hook up our new cooler lines. So I'm going to put a drawing on the screen right now of the flow of the transmission fluid to be cooled. Now there's debate on where you should put your auxiliary cooler in that flow. I put it last because I want all the stock cooling system to cool the fluid as much as possible, and then if my auxiliary cooler needs to kick on, it will. It has a sensor to kick on at 180 degrees. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have that last in the flow, but again, I mentioned this at the beginning. These are from Logan Ellis on Facebook. Definitely hit him up. He made it super simple to do this. I told him what I wanted. He knew exactly what fittings, and the price was exceptional for what it is. So That's what I'm going to do, is just follow that flow of coolant and hook all these up. He actually labeled them all to tell me which one is to go to where. So again, he went above and beyond for what I asked of him, and I'm completely satisfied. So I'm going to get these hooked up, and then we'll fill the transmission up and take her for a rip. All right, guys, it's been a long day. You can see it is dark outside. I made a mistake that cost me probably 5 hours today. So I was putting in the new tranny cooler fittings, and they're aluminum. And I was putting this one in the transmission. I over tightened it and broke it off. And so the fitting was stuck in there. It took forever. So I finally got it out. I got a new fitting in there. It's not black though, like all the other ones, because I had to just find one that I could find locally. But it'll work. So I got all the lines put in. I got the exhaust put back on. That kind of fought me, but I got it on really good now, better than I had it on before. So let me show you underneath. So there's our new lines in there. That fitting right there was the culprit. Luckily I had quite a bit of room to work, so you know, it could have been a lot worse, and I just didn't want to screw up the threads getting the fitting out. So I got it and it's good now, but these lines look awesome. Here's my auxiliary cooler. Right there. I just have to hook up the sensor for the auxiliary cooler, and we got to fill up the transmission. And I think that's it. I think I'm going to fill it up. It's late. I don't want to film the first driving video in the dark because this camera doesn't do good in the dark. So I'm going to fill it up. I'm going to get all my tools cleaned up, and then tomorrow we're going to fire it up and go drive it. So it takes a while to fill up. I've got that double deep pan on, so I think it takes 12 quarts. I got to look it up again, but it takes a lot of tranny fluid. So I'll do that. I'll get everything cleaned up, and then tomorrow we will take it for its maiden voyage. So wish me luck. All right, guys, I got it all buttoned up. Look at how much ATF it took. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Whew, but it didn't take a full 17. One of the fittings wasn't tight, so I had to tighten it, but I made a little mess right here. So, but it's reading normal now. Make sure when you're checking your tranny fluid on these trucks, you have it in neutral on flat ground. That's how the factory service manual tells you to check the transmission fluid level. So let's take it out on the road and see how it feels. I'm kind of excited. I think you guys are too. All right, guys, first initial reaction with the new Suncoast torque converter, stock stall. I'm excited to see how it is. Just driving out in the driveway, it does feel, I don't know how to describe it, tighter, less slop. Yeah, it's quicker. That was about to 40. Feels good. So we're gonna take it a little faster at this stop sign. All right, here we go. Yeah, it just feels way more, I don't know how to say it, tighter or efficient. It just goes. And when you're, so if I'm going 50 and I'm cruising just with no throttle, if I lay into the throttle, you can feel it just put the power down, as opposed to the stock converter. It almost felt like it was taking forever to get that power, I don't know, that power to go through the torque converter. I don't know what it was, but it does feel a lot more efficient, I guess is how we'll describe it. All right, let's do another little pull. Yeah, that feels really good. I'm excited to see what the numbers say, and I'm excited to put a trailer behind it. So that was a lot of work. It wasn't hard, it just took a long time. So we got it done. I'm gonna go home, park it, check for any leaks, make sure it's all tidied up, but it should be good to go. Yeah. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I hope it was beneficial. Make sure whatever torque converter you go with, whether it's Suncoast or someone else, make sure to talk to them, know exactly the particulars, like that friction shim that they sent with it. I would have screwed that up had I not called and asked them. So make sure you talk to them, just get any particulars that they have with their converter. And nice. So thanks for the support. Next video with this truck, we're going to be doing some pulling and doing some number comparisons, see how efficient this torque converter is. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the next video.